really happy to be here today in front of the AIA crowd. And joining me on screen is our three panelists. They're one of our clients from Platt Architecture. We have Ren, who is their Director of Finance, Jana, their Office Manager, and Bud, their Senior Project Manager. So being a residential architecture firm, we talked about how your projects can vary from something that's as small as a front porch or to a multi-story home. How do you create a project management process for such a variety of work and different custom requirements?
Yeah, it's funny because just this morning I was on a job site for a former client that we're doing a renovation for that's relatively small. And last week I was on a job site for about to embark on a design for someone down at the coast. That's a multi-million-dollar vacation home. So we have a huge cross section of projects, but we've discovered that all projects have the same moving parts, whether or not it's like I said, a renovation addition or from scratch custom house. And they all have a program, they all have a budget, they all have a timeline, consultant. So we definitely have the same amount of moving parts in all of our projects. And sometimes the smaller projects are even more challenging to deal with the budget because you just don't have the fee associated with the smaller projects. So we have found that utilizing tools like Big Time, for a plug for Big Time there, has been helpful for us just because there's, again, so many moving parts. Those tools really help us a lot. We have a lot of checklists and it's like in Google Docs that we use. And we have experimented with different project management software, but we found a lot of them can be really cumbersome and bulky, and really for a firm our size, feel like we're kind of too big to be small and too small to be big. So sometimes finding that sweet spot of project management processes without being too regimented has been a challenge, but we have a good system going right now, I think.
Can I tag on to that a little bit? We also, I think COVID helped us think about our project management process as well, because we went from being in the office to everybody working from home, with the exception pretty much of Bud and Parker, who continued to kind of be a home base and a hub for the whole team, and Jana. And in that time, we figured out more ways to use Slack, making Slack channels for every single project. We thought about better ways to use our Google Drive. Jana reorganized it and made it consistent across projects, which was a big deal for us. And I think it forced us to really think about the ways in which we both manage. It's like adaptive tenacity, kind of like where things have to be the same, and then where you have to adapt to the kind of project that you have to make things different. And while Bud is 100% right, and he knows the most about this out of any of us in the office, there are things that are going to happen no matter what kind of project that you're doing. And I think some architects in the room sometimes joke that they should have bracelets that say, "What would Bud do?" About how they file things or how they approach problems. And I think even just having that go-to point person, which for us is Bud most of the time, to know who to ask. And that a lot of that comes with just having like that organizational knowledge, because he's been here for so long that he really understands our brand and the style in which we perform things and the manner in which we work. So being able to have that kind of consistency behind your project management, I think, helps a lot too.
Yeah, and Ren's right. I mean, COVID really sort of gave us a big eye opener. It's been actually really beneficial in a weird sort of way. It sort of exposed some of our weaknesses and helped us figure out things we needed to focus on so that we could sort of weather the storm at the time. But it's really been beneficial in a lot of ways.
Gosh, now I'm thinking, what would Bud do? Would have been a better webinar title. Jana, did you have something too? Sorry.
Yeah, I was just adding on a little note that we, just to brag a bit, during COVID became a fully cloud-based company. We were still on a local server doing things a lot of ways the old-fashioned way. So we're very happy to be cloud-based and like stepping into this century. It's great.
Yeah, and when your firm is evolving over 40 years, it sometimes it's hard to let go of some of those old practices and processes just because that's what you know how to do. But when you surround yourself with smart people, and makes those kinds of changes easier.
Yeah, I know we see that with a lot of other clients. Just the change is scary, but once you get through it, works out. But this is going back to your earlier response about how you mentioned most of your projects involved a third-party consultant. How does that play into your processes?
Yes, we almost always have consultants. We have to meet certain deadlines with them. We have to, have RFPs and ask them for a proposal, and there's a lot of back and forth. So we have a lot of checklists in place to make sure we hit those milestones. Obviously, we could be better and more efficient. Ren has set up some places for us to keep tabs on consultants' proposals versus actuals. At the beginning of a lot of our projects, we'll make some assumptions about consultant costs based on what we know about the project at that time. And then as we move through the project, we continue to keep track of that and update that in our monthly project manager meetings, just to be sure that we're staying on the rails in terms of the overall cost, because any big change in a consultant cost obviously affects the bottom line. So you just need to be able to adjust and factor that in as you're moving through a project. And John and Ren can probably elaborate on some of those as well. But we have a lot of third-party consultants, and softwares like Big Time has been really beneficial in that regard.
In earlier when I talked about our micro level kind of KPIs internally, I would say managing consultant budgets is a big part of that, because that affects how many hours we can allocate to a project when you're looking at what your actual working budget is for a job and trying to hit our targets for how profitable an individual job needs to be. Because if you run into a problem, for instance, like with structural engineering, and your engineering budget goes from $20,000 to $40,000, that's a huge hit to your project and your bottom line. And we need to be able to absorb that sooner rather than later, so that we can adjust how we're working on a project accordingly. Or just know that this project is going to hit somewhere, and we really can't spiral out of control with where we what rabbits we chase. We got to kind of stay on task.
Yeah, and it's also helpful to have all that captured in one place, as basically building a database, so that you can project on future projects, where you need to be as you're building out the financial for the next year.
Sorry, I'll be right back. I just have to take care of my dog. Not the ideal. Give me one
second.
But I think we're also working are we starting to work in ArchiCAD with some of our consultants and having them collaborate in the file? Are we not there yet?
Yes, we are. We're sticking our toes in the water with that. We have our consulting engineer that has been trained in ArchiCAD now, so we're working with them on direct interaction in ArchiCAD. And I know that's been around for a while, but it's been new to our firm. So it's been a little bit of a learning curve there, but that integration has been nice.
Hopefully it makes our work with consultants more efficient too, as we do that, and figuring out timelines and
that's right.
And getting earlier projections on how much a project is going to cost for the consultant.
That's very true.
All right, sorry about that. I'm back.
It's okay.
Okay, so Ren, this question is for you. We often hear from our clients how critical the connection between finance and project management teams is. What would you say your firm has done to improve this communication cross-functionally? And has there been any kinks that you've had to work out throughout the years?
Oh yeah, tons. So when I first started here 9 years ago, when it came time, we didn't do a great job keeping track of project budgets, especially not from an hourly perspective. We weren't demanding, I guess, that architects keep their time to projects in a strict way, or really paid a lot of attention to it. And we're trying, and that's an evolving process. Like this isn't an autocracy. So I can't go into the workroom as much as I would like to sometimes and say, do it now or do it like this. It's not how we work. So we've been evolving toward better timekeeping practices to help with that. And everybody, I think part of that evolution is making sure that our team understands why it's important. And I think people in general, it's human nature to do things or pay more attention to how you're doing things if you can see them in the big picture and not as like an individual small task. So in having more meetings with the architects and me having more one-on-one meetings with the architects to look at project budgets and to think about where we are on a project so that I can create invoices for our clients because they have direct input into that, showing them how the time matters for that, how logging their time matters for that, and them understanding the bigger picture of that makes a huge difference. And so when I first got here, we weren't talking about that very much. And I would give all the architects a spreadsheet, like a piece of paper, an 11 by 17 piece of paper that had all their projects listed on it. And it would say like, we build to here, where are we now? And everybody would like handwrite their stuff in. And I think there was a disconnect at that point between like what the architects thought and what I thought, and then what Parker thought. And so we've worked really diligently over the last, I'd say 7 years to evolve that process and make it more streamlined and more connected between how the architects see where the project is in terms of their drawings and where the project is in terms of our deliverables to the clients, and how that relates to how much time we're spending on a project and what phase we're in. And then also what that means for the schedule Bud has laid out and where we are for that, and connecting all those small pieces together instead of thinking of them as individual and distinct things, but making it more of a chain and a connected piece, and then being able to put that in front of our president because he is very involved in the day-to-day operations of our company, which I think helps us all feel very accountable for what we're doing to ourselves and to each other. Because he, at the end of the day, reviews every single bill that goes out of here and makes sure that he thinks that's what we should be showing to the clients. And we used to have a lot of back and forth, and we've gotten that process so streamlined that by the time it's in front of him, he understands why those numbers are there. And he more often than not agrees with them. He might tweak them a little bit, but having those one-on-one monthly meetings for me with the project managers, and then creating more of a rapport so that when they do have a change to their project, they can open up my door and say, hey, we need to sit down and look at my project budget again. Jana goes to all of their staffing meetings, their weekly staffing meetings. And if she sees big changes to the schedule, she immediately comes into my office after those meetings and we talk about what that means so that I can think about what our fee forecast is going to be and how that's going to lay out. And I know it sounds like meetings on meetings on meetings, but it's not that many. And those handful of meetings, those hours here and there, 30 minutes here and there, have led to a smoother flow for what our project budgets are and how it relates to our billing process, which then translates to revenue for us.
And I'll add to that, when I started working here, I was writing my time down on a piece of paper. So that's how far we've come a long way since then. And following up on what Ren said, we were tracking our budgets kind of from the top down. In other words, the principal and the president were focused on the budget more so than the rest of the staff. And now I think we've sort of flipped it. And now the project managers are highly focused on it and working it from the bottom up, so that it makes the process go much smoother, makes everybody more accountable for it. And it makes your interaction in terms of how you get the bills through the office much faster, I think, much more efficient.
And this next question kind of relates because I know you guys have grown so much over the years, especially from tracking time on paper to now, on a software. Jana, do you have any advice on getting staff buy-in on new processes just related to project management or really anything internally?
Yeah, staff buy-in is super important for any new process that we implement. You have to have staff buy-in. I think the most important part for me is when I'm coming up with a new way of doing things, to get it to a point where like I understand why I'm doing it and how it will work like to my core. So I understand it backwards and forwards, and I can explain it really well, and but not so set in stone that that there's no need to get buy-in or no need to get feedback from staff. So when I go to present it to them, you know, I know it well enough that I sound like I know what I'm talking about and they can believe in the idea, but also, you know, flexible. So if they give me a suggestion, I can take it or not and apply it to what we're trying to do. I think, yeah, being open to improvement is really important. Being open to new ideas is really important. Yeah.
Your file
Also,
Sorry,
yeah.
your file structure is a really good example of changing the file structure.
Yeah, we totally rehauled the way that we file things digitally, and it was a big change. But I think another key is meeting people where they're at technology-wise. We have a wide range of technological abilities. We have a lot of people that are super savvy and some that aren't as savvy. And so I've had larger meetings to present the more general idea, and then I've had individual meetings with people who didn't quite get it, to walk it through with them one-on-one. And that's been really helpful at making people feel like they're not being left behind. So that's important.
Yeah, and again, all of our processes were sort of originally based on a paper office, you know, when we had paper drawings, fax machines, paper files, and now, you know, most of that's is almost all of it's digital now. So the same filing structure didn't make sense, and we were kind of hanging on to that for a long time. So we finally just said, okay, this is ridiculous. We got to do something. So John has really led the charge on just reorganizing our filing structure in a way that makes sense. And it's been, you know, all those little things add up to such greater efficiency for the office. You know, it's remarkable how much of a difference that can make.
Yeah, probably even all the meetings you mentioned, Ren, but they add up to save time in the long run. Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
Especially when it's time to turn out a bill and there's less back and forth.
Right.
Yeah.